Weakness. What if you're not weak? What if everything that you have encountered is a part or a piece of you that had to survive? You're not weak. You never were. And sometimes being in a position where someone has the ability to tell you that you were makes you feel that you are. Yeah, that piece. Welcome back to the Beth B Effect, where the vibe is unmuted, unafraid, and unapologetic. I'm Beth, and today I want to talk to my caregivers. I want to talk to the mom whose children are adults now. I want to talk to the person with aging parents who can't fathom the idea of their parent being in a different situation, one that we can't see because they've always been the strong one. What if that's just our role now? I want to talk to the hardworking woman, the one who is working two jobs to survive, and not just to survive, but to support herself and her children. I want to talk to the woman who may not have children, but they're career driven and they're determined to be a better version of themselves. We matter. We've always mattered. We've always been the person, and maybe not for others, but we should be okay with being just that for ourselves. Sometimes we grow up in spaces where we're pushed to become the adult early. Sometimes we're put in spaces where we may not have to grow up so soon, but we matured with time and we were able to see reality as it was. And then there's some of us who come from a family that was prominent. Maybe they had everything they needed. They were able to provide for their children, their family, themselves, and they weren't eager to become career driven. But at some point, they were required to become career driven. Tonight, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you because I need you to remind yourself that you matter. And sometimes what happens is sometimes we come from childhood and we are either, for a lack of better words, spoiled because we come from a prominent space, or we're pushed into adulthood because we're missing one parent and we're supporting the other parent while during their parenting process. Or some of us make different choices and we wind up with people who never meant to be or didn't have the ability to be responsible, to take care of their other space. I'm talking to you. And I know a lot of men going to jump on this platform and say, we need our brothers, or we need the other half, or we can't survive on our own. And that just might be true. That may be true. Maybe we can't. Maybe when we were told, right, by our Adams that we were their other half, maybe we didn't feel like that. Maybe we weren't given that opportunity. Some of us have situations with baby fathers, right? Either because we chose differently, because who am I to say that you're wrong? We chose the representative of the person who presented themselves as that guy, that person, the trustworthy one, the one with the charm, you know, that charm behavior, the one you can't see. Now, I'm not here to point fingers at nobody, so don't y'all start jumping at me and saying, "Oh, Beth, you shouldn't say." Yeah, maybe not. I'm not saying that all brothers are not good, because there are really, really some good brothers out here. There are some really good brothers out here. And for those of us who are not as religious, right, or we don't have a higher power that we subscribe to, for those people, because I am a subscriber of Christ, right, but I've managed to make some serious mistakes that have put me in a situation where I had to rebuild. But I'm talking about those of us who are still struggling no matter what the situation, no matter if we are taking care of aging parents, no matter if we are a single parent. We could be a married woman with a saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost person. But we still have our upbringings. And sometimes our upbringings put us in the situation that we are. Here's an example. I grew up in a household with a mother and a father. My father and my mother were born again Christians. They were prominent in the church. They were dominant in our home space. They were those people. But then they separated. And I, in some situations, was left to help the other parent manage. And in that space, I had no clue. I had no idea what to do. I didn't know. All I saw was one parent suffering at the hand of another. But who was I to blame though? If my one parent, who is no longer in my household, had to leave because they can't sustain a relationship with the person they once loved, I'm left with the other person to manage. And when you listen to that other person, you hear what they have to say and how they talk about the other parent, which is truly none of your business. You're left to make a decision. You're left to be in a space where now you're hating or feeling some type of way about the other parent because they weren't there. You chose, based on what you were told, to love the parent that was present. And not because you had to, but because you wanted to. And sometimes when you grow up in that space, you become mature very, very quickly. And in some cases, you miss the opportunity to be a child. Sometimes you come from a prominent family and you were given that opportunity. You did have the opportunity to grow up and become the version of yourself that was going to be a better you and a matured you. But you chose otherwise. Maybe you had influences. Maybe you saw something. You did experience something that wasn't related to your parents that forced you to grow up a little quick. Sometimes that's exactly what happens. No matter what it is, though, mother, caregiver, wife, a person that's dating, my sister, this is not typically a space where I elevate women because I feel like we're equal to men. I once had a job that put me in a position where I couldn't choose. I couldn't choose when I was going to be soft or when I needed to be hard, when I could cut it off when I got home. I had a career that put me in a space that I chose. Yeah, I chose it. So I'm not blaming everything that I experienced on that situation, but I am saying that I have two pieces. There are two and three or four intersections where I have to be mindful that in some case I didn't have the opportunity to grow up like a kid who came from a prominent family. And again, I did come from a space where it didn't start off bad. It actually started off great. And I got used to that space. And when it changed, I had a difficult time transitioning. And for a long time, I held that guilt because that situation where I had abandonment issues to some degree, I started choosing the things that prevented me or precluded me from suffering from sadness. But let's get back to the responsibilities we hold. Some of us are mothers, some of us are married, we are with our spouse, and maybe that spouse has a different idea of what roles look like in a household. And please don't start. I get it. I'm not the one for roles, right? I feel like if you see it, get it done. If the trash needs to be taken out and I come home first and it's smelly, I'm taking it out. But if my husband has been sitting here all day and he's let it be smelly, there's a problem. So I'm not saying that there's not a space where we can't exist with the brothers, but there are some spaces, caregivers, where we have aging parents. Maybe you're married, your parents are older, and you're taking care of them. Maybe you're the oldest child and that you feel like that's your responsibility. You expect your siblings to come in, but they don't to some degree. And when they do, it's not to the extent or the your expectations. And, well, we ain't talking about them today. The caregiver, the mother, the wife. Maybe you're married in a full-fledged situation. You love your husband and you were raised in a space that told you that this is a woman's responsibilities and that's a man's responsibilities. Maybe you grew up in that space. Maybe you feel that roles are necessary. But what about the single woman? I'm talking to you too, the single one. Maybe you have kids. You might have children and you're overcompensated because you need to. For more than one reason, not just because you have children, but you got something else going on. And you're dealing with that in the best way to hide that version of yourself. You overcompensate. And then there's the single woman who has none of the above. Some of you are looking for a man, and some of you aren't. And that's okay. But it is a space that we share. That's a common place that you and I go to when we're trying to figure things out. It's that space that we go to where we say, hmm, I have these set of responsibilities, but who do I want to be? Who am I? What do I look like? What version of myself am I today? How do I promote myself? How do I be better? What am I doing wrong? And then we go through life, right? Life happens. We've had a few boyfriends who weren't good or who weren't in the same space that we were in. They weren't in the same space. Maybe they were raised a little different. Maybe their interpretation of relationship was different from our own. Maybe that's the thing. But then some of us who are in that situation and we're bad dating, right, or wrong dating, or having difficulties identifying the person who fits or is in alignment with us. Some of us become parents out of that situation. And we feel strongly about the person that we love. We feel strongly about the person that we were liking, right? And then after we liked them, we started to love them. And then we set expectations. We set expectations in that scenario, thinking that what we think, what we feel, and how we can manage is our decision to make. Or we listen to what we hear in that space, the things that are being told to us that kind of helps and promotes us and encourages us to make certain decisions. And once we let our guard down, we make that decision and we say, it's okay to be here. It's okay to get pregnant here. It's okay to be in love here. We're in a safe space. And then there's the wife who is in the same situation. I'm listening to what's been told to me. I've taken all the necessary steps to be in a situation that I can trust, where I can feel safe. And then there's the aging parent situation, right? We feel safe all the time with our parents. We feel like they're going to be here forever. And the crazy thing is, right, we don't realize that they have the right to get older, but we don't like it. And we're in that space, we put that burden on ourselves to fix everything, because we've always been able to fix them. We've been supporting our parents, whether we were supporting our husband, raising our kids, overcompensating, working a job, being promoted, winding up in a space that we never thought belonged to us. And we get there. And in that space, we promote ourselves. We feel great about what we're doing. We're confident in what we're doing. We're okay with what we're doing. The only opinion that matters is our own. And I don't know if you're spiritual or you're religious. I don't know. Some of us are. Some of us are both. Some of us are religious and some of us are spiritual. Some of us are just religious. And then some of us who just deal with the spiritual aspect of life to manage the process. But here's the thing, no matter what realm you're in, no matter what space you're in, no matter how you identify, the fact still remains you have feelings and you're human. And sometimes we encounter spaces that force us to feel like we're not worthy. We're in spaces where somebody tells us their opinion about us and we forget that it's an opinion. Sometimes we're in spaces where we get a job, or we are in a relationship, or we're in a marriage, or we're doing the best we can as parents. And no matter what you do, despite your efforts, there's always something in the space to remind you that one person, or maybe two, or possibly three, told you you were weak, told you you were nothing, told you that you wouldn't survive without them, reminded you of your beauty or your body or your intelligence, your level of intelligence, or the thing that attracted them to you. You're reminded that they're the only person who would be interested in you for that particular situation. Sometimes you're told, I'm the only one that will love you. The only reason I love you is because of this. Maybe there's a parent who reminds you you're not a parent after you've supported them for so long. Maybe you're at a job, right? And you feel like the counterpart to your supervisor, and then it only takes one opportunity to knock you down. In those spaces, though, we got to be reminded that we're human and we are allowed to have feelings. We are allowed to respond to our emotions. We are allowed these things. We are allowed. And despite anything that anyone else has ever told you, we have to also be mindful that there's a voice inside our heads. Sometimes that voice says, oh my God, they say. And sometimes that voice says, remember who you are. Remember what you've done. Remember what you're capable of. Remember how you survived. You were not weak. And you especially weren't weak because somebody else told you that you were. It's an opinion. Because the fact is, your words matter too. You're not responsible for holding everything together. Sometimes we can be the glue that binds, but when it starts to mess with your mental health, your emotional health, and your stress to capacity, you have to consider yourself. Now, while I'm not telling every mother to run away from their kids because we have to be mothers, right? I love my babies. And when they're grown, that's a different set of circumstances. And I'm not telling every wife that has a husband that won't wash dishes or a spouse, right? I'm not telling every woman that has a spouse that they should run away at the sight of a person who may not be so helpful, or may not be as domesticated. They gotta be financially savvy. So I ain't telling you to stay with nobody that's making you spend all your money either. So I'm not about spitting your wheels. If y'all know anything about the Beth B Shift, right? The Beth B Shift is about telling the truth, unmuted, unafraid, and unapologetic. Y'all know that. But here's the thing: be mindful that you matter. Be mindful that your voice matters. Be mindful that you have a voice. You have a voice. You have a voice. And despite anything that anyone else has ever told you about you, your voice matters too. Now, I'm not telling you to walk around and be like, oh, I don't believe what they say. I am who I am. It is what it is. Sometimes we can use the opinion of another person for correction, constructive criticism, right? But what I am telling you is not to base everything you do, your feelings, your emotions, and your thoughts on someone else's opinion. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for you. I don't want you to think that every time somebody says you're weak, you're not worthy, or you don't amount to something, that you have to believe them. Because you don't. There's nothing weak about you. Think of everything you've done, all that you have accomplished. Think about how people respect you outside of the space where you aren't respected. And I know it can be challenging. It can be really challenging to be in that space. It can be challenging to be in a space where you're not respected at work because your supervisor feels they know everything and you don't have a voice. You may not have a voice in that space. You may not have a voice in a space where you're with a husband or a person, because I don't want to limit this to just men, because some of us are in spaces where we're with someone else who has different ideas from us, and their ideas might be okay for them. They might be okay for them. And someone in the comments is now asking me, oh, that's hey, Rodney. Is there an option with love or judgment? Is there an option with love or judgment? So, Rodney, I'm gonna need you to clarify what that means so I can better elaborate. Thelma, hey sis, I see you there. Thank you so much. I think Chef is here too. My sister Roslyn is here. Thank you, sis, for joining. I appreciate you guys. But Rodney, I need you to clarify a little bit. What do you mean? Is there option with love or judgment? Because I want to make sure I answer this correctly. Right? Because in those spaces where love exists, what is love? What is love? We gotta figure that out. What is love? What does love look like? And I think in a lot of spaces we don't unpack what our definition of something is versus the person that we're dealing with or the situations we've dealt with. We have to see what those spaces look like. Is there an opinion with love or judgment? So, is there an opinion with love? If someone who loves you has an opinion, that's a different situation. That's totally different. So let's unpack love, right? Love is a space where someone has an unconditional emotion towards you that's fatuating, right? They share a space. You own a space in the compartment that is sacred. They're willing to do anything for you. They're willing to protect you, love you, keep you grounded. Love, unconditional. A space where you feel safe. A space that's created just for you to feel space, to feel safe. So from that space, if a person gives you opinion and they say to you, and you know for true, because of their actions, not because of their words, but you know for truth that they love you when they give you words from the heart that make you say, I may need to consider that. That might be something that I can change, or maybe that's constructive, right? It can build me up, help me grow and develop. When a person is giving you love and opinions from a loving space, it's easier to accept. It's easier to acknowledge. It's easier to conform. But when you're getting words from a space, from a person or a situation that's completely judgmental, and let's be clear, how do you know it's judgmental? How do you know that the words a person is sharing with you does not come from a place of judgment? Well, first we got to have a checklist, right? We got to figure out if they love us first. And in some spaces they do. But in other spaces, people can be pompous, self-righteous, correct from the seat of a pedestal that sits on high. Sometimes the words come from a place that can't be understood, that'll always be misunderstood. And if those words, if you can identify what someone is saying to you that is sitting on a pedestal and looking down at you saying, you need to fix that. You need to get that together. You need to change that. What's the benefit for? Now, sometimes the benefit is for you to change so you can conform to be the person they want you to be. But then there's some situations where the person just likes pointing fingers. The person just speaks from a heart that misunderstands everything that is presented to them. Sometimes people speak from a space that's completely selfish. They don't care at all how you feel, what you think. Their opinion is all that matters. What they have to say is the only thing that matters. And it doesn't matter where they got that information from. It can be the Bible, their parents, the SOP. That person is different from a person who loves you. And here's what I'm going to tell you, because y'all know the Beth B Shift is about what? Shifting, right? Because here's the shift. When you recognize and identify a person who is loving you from a space where you can take words, you say, I'm going to take that. I'm going to be a different version of myself. I'm going to be better because what you're saying is from your heart. And I know that you love me. You mean me no harm. I can take that situation and say, okay, let's work on that. Let's concentrate on it. We're going to fix it. We're going to tweak a little bit. But then there's the other person. There's the other person who's just judgmental. And let's unpack what judgmental looks like. I know I said these words before, but self-righteous, right? Can't do no wrong. Never sees wrong, feels like where they came from was the creme de la creme, and they can speak from that seat. Even when they say they learned the lesson, even when they feel like they've done better, or even when they feel like they're the person that listened the first time, so now they want to share that information with someone else. But what does that look like? Is that person perfect? Are they now perfect because they come from a space where they've learned lessons, they learned from their actions? And even if that is so, they don't get to point fingers, right? They don't get to tell you, this is who I think you are. This is how you need to change. And I read this, or I know this. I know some Bible scholars right now who would love to tell me, oh, Beth, you're really doing this, or you have a podcast that doesn't represent the person that you love for true. Yeah, no, probably had that. I got the Bible scholar that's going to tell me that, oh, you have a heart from God. You have a message from God. Your podcast should be about this, your podcast. They're probably right. But until I get to that space, I'm right here. Because the first thing we have to be able to do is identify who we're talking to. Who am I speaking to? Why are you telling me this? And what is it that you have to gain? How do you gain from giving me advice? How do you gain by making me feel like I'm not on your level? How do you gain, or what is there to gain because I'm not on the level that you are? We got to be mindful that every baby that's born is given the opportunity to crawl before they walk. And I know we got a little off cancer because I have comments and I'm addressing those comments, but I want to go back to not being weak. No matter what anybody tells you, no matter what the opinion of another person conveys, no matter what that person has been through, no matter what their past looks like, no matter what their upbringing looks like, your voice matters. Like, you matter for real. There's so many intersections that we can put together. You can have a person who comes from a prominent family who eventually broke up. They wound up being a baby mother. They have children out of wedlock. And in their religious background, it's like, oh my God, I'm the worst of the worst because my father said that if I do this, I'm going to be, I'm not going to be great. You have some people who don't grow up in religion at all. And they're like, it is what it is. I'm doing the best I can. And look at this. I have children, two children who earned their doctorates. I have no husband and I'm outside. So it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your background. Every person has strength and confidence. Where that comes from, different spaces. Sometimes we have examples, we have mentors, we have people who will encourage us, just like we have the ones who will discourage us. We have people that will encourage us. We have to learn to identify who we're talking to and what they're saying to us, because every person's opinion about me can make me feel like I'm weak. And even in straight spaces where I'm confident and strong, if I love you to a certain degree, I'll forget what you're saying is an opinion. And I'll take it for granted. And I hold on to it and I'll think about it. I concentrate on it. And it can come from any space. It can come from my mother, my father, my cousin, my spouse, my boss, my friend. Sometimes those words can make me feel like my words don't matter. You're not weak. You're not less than because somebody else says you're not where they are. Be mindful that a person that tells you you're not here, they might not be there either. That's exactly, you're exactly right, Rodney. Don't let people put labels on you that don't belong. You have to identify who you are. And I mean this in the best way because I know there are some of us that say, I am who I am. It is what it is. This is who I am. Yes, we all have the right to be who we are and act in the fashion in which we choose. But there's a space for constructive criticism, and there is a space for I am her, or a space for I am him. We have to identify who we're talking to. Because if you're talking to the wrong person, what you doing? What? Always ask yourself this question. If I'm talking to you and I'm taking what you have to say, or these are the words you have to give me, first, let's identify who you are as a person. Let's identify what you got going on. Let's then identify who you are, period. And now I want to know why you're telling me. What told you to come over here and convey that message? And a lot of my people will love to say, oh, God told me, the Lord told me to speak to you. And in some cases, that is true. Sometimes God give me stuff that I'm supposed to give to someone else. And sometimes be right there in the spur of the moment. But even those spaces, I got to back up a little bit and go, okay, Beth, you have an opinion about this person. So is this really God? You can't sit on a pedestal. I'm not saying that I do. I don't. I'm pretty good at managing myself. But when I run into my girl over at the liquor store and she's like, hey, sis. And I'm like, hey, sis. Hey, sis, I want to go to the rehab this week. All right, sis, you got my number. Call me when you're ready. Hey, sis, you got 50 cents. We come out. It's, and I switch a little bit. And I go, I set myself up for that. But I still love her, though. I don't judge her. I don't tell her she needs to be where I am. And we're about the same age. She's a mother. I don't tell her that she needs to be with her children. I don't tell her that she needs to be sober so she can have a better life and be a better version of herself. I don't tell her in that respect. Tell her in other space, in other ways, but not where I'm pointing a finger at her and making her feel like I'm better than her because I know the lesson and I was able to sustain. I don't do that. A lot of people like to look down on other people and point fingers. And the problem with that sometimes is they don't even know they're doing it. They don't know. They think they're doing good. They think they're doing the right thing. They think they're doing good by you. They think they're in a space where they've learned lessons and now they can share the information from the lessons they learned. And hear me and steer me clear. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I need you to identify who you're talking to. Who's telling you this? What do they look like? Do you respect them to the end? Do you have unconditional love for them and what they're saying? Can you see their actions tell you that they have unconditional love for you? Because that changes everything. Who are they to you? Who do they think you are outside of the constructive criticism? Who are you to them? And then who are they to them? Because if you think you're better than me already, I can't win. No matter what I do, your opinion is always going to be in the negative. It won't be in the positive. And even in spaces where you may give me accolades for one thing or another, it'll never outweigh the constructive criticism that you have to offer. And in that case, and in that space, I have to consider what pedestal you're on. Because if I always value your opinion, I'll never hear my own. So be mindful, caregiver, who's doing the best they can for the parent, who's saying, oh, you weren't this, you were never that, I didn't like you anyway. You're doing what you're doing because you chose to do it, and that's okay. Remember the spouse who's always in a space where her other half is complaining all the time, doesn't see the great and good that you have accomplished, doesn't see that you are in a space where you guarantee that they're okay in every instance. To the mother who's in that space, doing things for her children who never say thank you. And when they do, it matters, but it doesn't, because there's always some disciplinary action that needs to take place. To the single person, single, who is hard on themselves, because we're all hard on ourselves. We all give ourselves these things and goals, and we set the standard. Sometimes the standard is based and elevated and escalated on the opinion of another person. And even for my brothers who are listening, right? Because sometimes you can be in that space. Sometimes you may have a spouse. Sometimes you may have a friend who makes you feel like you're not that guy. Nothing you ever say is okay or correct because they know something better. I'm talking to you too. No matter who you are, right? Your opinion matters. You have one. Listen to your own voice. In a space where you trust a higher power, be there. Love on that. Absolutely, Rodney. Love on that. Love on that. Love on that. Love on that. But Rodney is in the comments and he's saying, I don't like it when people take snapshots and think they know me. Don't judge me on one moment. Get to know me. And that's important, right? A person sees us, captures one moment in time. And we may not be on our best behavior. Sometimes we might be in a space. Sometimes we might not be up to par. We might not be the version of ourselves. That's great. But give me some grace. Don't be so quick to judge. And if you feel like you are better than me and that pedestal is a little bit higher than where I sit, remember where you were. You weren't always here. And somebody gave you grace. And that's where we're human, right? That's what we put ourselves in the space of another person, and we're compassionate. If anybody has told you you were weak, if anybody told you you were unworthy, if there was a space that you lived in where all those words fell on top of each other, and now you're in a space where you can't find your voice, you can't see yourself, you can't figure it out. It used to be easy, but now you're struggling. You're being challenged with the idea of another person's opinion of you. Take a moment and breathe. Identify where you are. And then in those spaces where the words are more compelling than your own, figure out who they're coming from. Who said that to make you feel that way? Who told you that you were weak? What caused that emotions? Because a lot of times words are attached. They are attached to emotions. And we base what we feel, what we do, what we think on that instance. That can keep us stuck. When we identify who's talking to us, the words they're choosing to say, listen to words. Words are very important. People choose what they say based on what they think and feel. You ever heard of a Freudian slip? You ever been in a space where you're like, don't say red, don't say red, don't say red, don't say red. And the person walks right up on you and go, I was gonna wear red today. Or, oh my gosh, I'm so used to seeing you in your red coat. Or some kind of way red comes flowing out your mouth. when you had every intention of not doing at all. That is a Freudian slip. And sometimes people who sit on pedestals and chairs where they look down on people because they've been through this or they've been through that, they experienced this or they have this, the Freudian slip is telling you what they feel. And then when their emotional intelligence kicks in and they see your response, your facial, your micro expressions, the little pieces of your face that go, it's not big because when you're mad, it's like this. A micro is like, because now you're misunderstood, right? So in that space where the Freudian slip comes out, a person tells you what they feel and gives you constructive criticism. They can either say, "Hey sis, I don't like braids on you. I like it when you have your hair down with the part in the middle. I can accept that." But then there's some spaces like, "Hey sis, I don't like it when you wear your hair like that because I love the part in the middle and I love how your hair flow on both sides. And if you ever need money, because that's a cheap hairstyle, which it ain't. My sisters that get your hair braided, no, this ain't cheap. But if you ever need money, because I notice every time, you're kind of in between pockets, you get some braids. Now you get the full, because I know that example might be a little confusing, but y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm saying when people go too far, when they go past constructive criticism, when they go into a different space where you have to consider what they're saying, why they're saying it, and where it came from. All advice ain't good advice. Everybody that talks to you ain't always going to say something good to you. Unmuted, unafraid, and unapologetic. And I'm telling you, you have to consider your own words, because your words matter. You're not weak. You're stronger than you think. And just because someone else is comparing themselves to you, comparing their space to yours, their experience to yours, their background to yours, their life learned lessons to yours, they'll always have an opinion. They'll always point a finger. But if you don't take the opportunity to know what you need to know for yourself, you'll always be managed by someone else's thoughts and opinions of you. You're not weak. You're not weak because someone else says you are. Know that for true. Back up a bit from the words that are forcing you and encouraging you to be in a space where you second guess yourself. You know who you are. You've been a strong individual thus far to do what you're doing. You've been taking care of your parents, taking care of your children, taking care of your household, your spouse, or just taking care of yourself. And that's okay. But you're not weak. Know that words of advice are an opinion. Sometimes they should be valued, in other cases, they should just be heard. This has been the Beth B Shift. And until I see you guys again, stay grounded.